Colby, Sam. Hey, congratulations on your new film, Ganymede.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you so much.
appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Such an interesting thriller. So tell us where the original idea actually came from for Ganymede.
Yeah, so I started writing this in about 2019, and at that time, and I think it's escalated more now, but at that time, I felt the rhetoric around the LGBTQ community, our community was getting more and more extreme, and it was particularly taking on a sort of religious tone. You would hear a lot of talk about demonic and trying to spread our homosexuality to others or our queerness or transness to others. And I thought, what if you are growing up in a household where this really is the ideology? And so if you are secretly gay or queer and this is your household, what would it be like if you perceived your own homosexuality or queerness as an evil entity that was afflicting you and your family?
Mhm.
And, what would that do to your psyche and how would that, manifest in your life? And that was kind of the genesis of it.
Yeah.
Now you said this is just fairly recent, and what, 2019? Is that what you said?
Yeah, in 2019, I think we went through a period of what I would say of acceptance, and now we're in kind of a backlash. We made historic gains, gay marriage, etc., acceptance in society. I often say acceptance of LGBTQ people is an all-time high, and so is LGBTQ hate crimes and rhetoric against them is at an all-time high. And those two things are linked to each other. And so it's exploring what this kind of backlash to the progress we've made in recent years looks like, and the tone and tenor that it's taking is specifically religious, and that is, concerning.
Absolutely. Now, of course, people watching the film, and you try to answer it multiple times, is what exactly is a Ganymede? Because for people who aren't too religious, we're not too familiar with that term.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that I first came across researching another project about 16 and 1700s Molly houses, which are like gay bars in London from a long time ago. They wouldn't have said gay at the time, but the equivalent of them. And I came across the word Ganymede over and over again, and I was like, well, what is this? And it was a gay slang term that meant you were like a young, foppish, attractive, sort of feminine gay man who was enticing to others. And so I kind of paired that with the idea that you know a lot of the rhetoric around us is that we're trying to convert others to homosexuality or queerness or to be trans, which is obviously not the case. But marrying those two ideas together and putting it in a religious context as well, it comes from Greek mythology, which I won't get into because it would derail us. But there is a world in which this mythology could survive through, Hellenic Christians. And I just thought, what if this is something that was being used to label other people in this context and say that's someone who's trying to, overtake others with their homosexuality.
Mhm.
So, at which point did the film go from sort of like a religious drama thriller discussion into a supernatural aspect? When was that brought on?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the thing with the story is and I know for myself personally, when I thought about the way I was struggling with being closeted, I came out when I was 20, and in my adolescence, I went through 18 years of Catholic school. And in Catholicism, for the specific experience I had, there was a lot of rhetoric around you are a bad person if you are gay or this or that. And so I really held on to that shame secretly, and really was dealing with this shame and really dealing with this idea that I am a bad person that will go to hell. And I think that idea of hell is often perceived as demonic and fire and brimstone. And so this manifestation of evil, I think, was really something that I think I wanted to personally personify in this story. And organically and collaboratively, Colby and I were discussing what would this experience be if someone is struggling with their sexuality, but then there's this monstrosity that they create around it for themselves. And I know for myself, maybe that would have been like a defense mechanism, probably to be saying like, this is myself as a monster, this is a monster that exists, and it is something that is a red herring that I am looking at instead of this even scarier thing in some ways, which is coming out. So I think that allegorically, it's really just that way of confronting your fears about identity. And we feel like, queerness in and of itself can start really scary, but once you can get through that threshold, it can be something really hopeful. So I think that was the two-dimensional line that we were trying to put throughout the film.
And it can quite literally be, depending on the context and what your family's telling you or what your church is telling you, it can be horrifying to realize that you're gay or queer identified in some way. And it just speaks to the idea that, this is still going on, and the context that you are growing up in really, really matters.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know religious history is always at odds with the psychology, trying to basically link people different as with the inner demons and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I did find it fascinating that you guys actually put that input into the film. But tell us about the creature effects. How did you come up with that design in the end?
Gosh, that's so funny. I mean, Colby was the one that really spearheaded that. I think you had a really specific vision for how you wanted the monster to look.
Yeah, I wanted to represent, some kind of like empty placeholder or something that was like being obscured, so a lot of the early drafts of the script said that, I imagined sort of a faceless creature. And through working with our wonderful special effects designer, Anthony Kozar, who's based here in Chicago, we started talking about what if it was sort of like fetal in nature, and representing, that through confronting this, there's a sort of a rebirth that's going on, and what that rebirth is Lee becoming his true self and stepping into himself and being fully aligned as an individual. And so, yeah, we had a lot of talk about just kind of a fetal look, and I think once you see the monster in the film, you can kind of see that in the head shape and the kind of translucent type color that they brought to it.
Mm-hmm.
So who in the end did you folks had play the monster?
Gosh, that was interesting because his name is Lucas Turner. He works as a creature actor often, and he was brought to us by the special effects artist Anthony Kozar, and he was really jazzed about taking on this role. And one thing that Anthony really liked about Lucas, having worked with him before, is that he was able to play in a way that like he could really like contort and distort his body to have creature-like presentation. And so what they did is they did a whole entire bodily painting on him. They would do the veins, they would spend hours basically putting a whole new skin on him, and then he would do things where he would contort his body and shift and shape. And I think one of the biggest challenges probably for anyone with this type of work was wearing the mask, which is like this whole entire thing that you're putting over your head. And then you really have to be very deliberate about the way that you're moving, the way you're breathing. We had to take breaks regularly to make sure that it was safe and effective the way that he was doing it. But he was game for really going into it and putting his heart into it, and really had a lot of fun with it. And it was a lot of fun for us to watch him do it. So
yeah, he worked really hard. I mean, it was like 100 degrees every day of the shoot. We shot in Kentucky in the middle of the summer, and he's wearing leather pants and a huge appliance on his head that is, weighs, I forget how much.
And then swimming underwater.
And then, yeah, exactly, underwater. So, I mean, we really put him through it, and he was so good and such a trooper, and is just a wonderful creature actor.
Yeah.
Now, there was a couple of subjects that you guys actually brought into this film that what you noted at the end of it. Let's first talk about the portrayals of suicide, because that is something that is actually happening in the in for a lot of gay men and women in the case, especially if they're closeted.
Absolutely. It's interesting. The opening, the brother was originally written to for sure have a form of death that happens. It was originally he is dying of AIDS, and then it shifted eventually to he's dying from suicide. And this was an idea brought on by our wonderful producer Mark Goldberg, who You know, he was talking about, he was like, I feel like there's something interesting here if we connect the water and the death through the water being a way that this happens, as opposed to dying in the hospital. And we totally agreed with that. And we really felt like what he was presenting as a option there was something that was really effective for tying the story together, given the water creature. But the death itself, I think, was something that was always consistently there. And a big part of that was the fact that there is a family shame and secret often tied around someone in the family who was gay and either died of AIDS or died by suicide. And queer identity is often tied with death based off of the history that we have had and the lack of support that we have had from our society. You know, so we really wanted that to be part of what this story is, especially as a Southern Gothic film. I think that's why you would have probably put it.
And the thing that is in common with both the beginning that never was, which was you know, Neil dying of AIDS alone somewhere far away from home, and him dying of suicide, is that both of those had an element of abandonment to them.
Yeah.
And the idea that particularly in that time, you know, 1989, there was so much shame that it was like you would just disassociate yourself with a family member if they were dying of AIDS somewhere far away in a city, or in this case, you know, Floyd's character says, no, you can't live with me and my husband. He won't allow it. He had nowhere to go. His parents didn't accept him. And so he thought, well, you know, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And so abandonment is what plays into like both of those. And I think that's what we were getting at with that opening scene.
Yeah.
So true, so true. And the other subject that you also touched upon, and I'm actually surprised because I haven't heard about conversion therapy since the 1990s. I didn't think you know, it was still around, but tell us about the portrayal of conversion therapy and why is it still relevant today?
Well, I think the thing that's most relevant is, you know, the wife of the Speaker of the House practices conversion therapy. That's the person third in line to the president, you know? And so this kind of ideology is high up in our government and it affects people and it affects policy every single day. And, you know, in terms of the way that it's portrayed in this film, obviously this is a genre piece, so things are like a little bit heightened. So, you know, I can't speak to if someone is practicing it exactly in the way that, you know, Pastor Royer is. But it does still exist and it's legal in many states. And you know, it has not gone away.
Yeah.
Tell us about the cast that that you guys wanted to fit perfectly into the roles of your film, Ganymede.
No, appreciate you saying that. We love the cast that's part of this, and we were really blessed. It all started with our casting director Matthew Glasner, who our producer Stephen Stanley introduced us to for this project, and he really wanted to listen to what was the vision that we had for these types of archetypes and characters and personalities, and he really brought in a lot of different ideas and options of like, okay, could it be this person? Could it be that person? And then when it comes to the main characters, Lee and Kyle, he introduced us to a myriad of tapes for Kyle, and we instantly zeroed in on Pablo, and we're like, this character, this actor is playing this character exactly the way we want. And with Jordan, he introduced us right before the pandemic happened. So we had Jordan cast pretty early on, and then Pablo was cast later after the pandemic was done, but their chemistry read was perfect together. And we just felt like what they were doing was really coming off so true. And honestly, they built a strong friendship with one another that I feel like gives that clear idea of connectedness that they have in the film. And then when it comes to David and Robin and Joe, I mean, they were just powerhouse talent that we were really lucky to be able to bring into this project, and their passion and love for it is, I think, what really brought them into the attraction of this work. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're just all wonderful actors and really contributed super grounded performances, which was, you know, key here because when you're talking about issues like this, it's, you know, particularly in a genre piece, you could go over the top, but, you know, one of our goals was to make sure that we're never winking at the audience or, you know, portraying this as anything other than serious.
As directors, how did you get these actors into their proper headspace for a film like this?
Well, you know, each of them is their own thing. You know, it's like they all need different things. And so I think the biggest thing is for us to create an environment where they don't feel like you know, they're gonna mess up and get in trouble for that, and just make sure that it's an environment where everybody feels comfortable and safe, and that, you know, nobody's gonna be, you know, stark raving mad if this take doesn't go well, because you know, when you put that type of pressure on actors, you know, their performances suffer. And so
Absolutely.
that I think is our biggest goal in terms of creating a headspace for each of them.
But one of my favorite things to watch Colby do was he would approach the actors with the script day by day and in whatever scene we were going into, and they would really talk. He would talk about kind of what his intention was writing it, what he thinks this character would be doing. He would bounce that dialogue off with them, and they would talk us about whether they totally aligned with that or had ideas or thoughts about it. And I feel like one thing that was really fun to watch you do, if I was working with a cinematographer or what have you, I would see you really being very collaborative with them and being able to make sure it was shaped and shifted into a way that both of you aligned with, so that they could tell their most honest performance while also honoring what you had written on paper. I would say.
Thank you.
Of course.
Absolutely. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question. So after all of this, what's next for the both of you?
Oh man, it's funny. You know, Colby and I work on our projects together. We're married and we also are creative collaborators because of that. I think that the way it works really well is he'll typically have we'll talk about some sort of different stories or options or things that would be interesting to be made into a film. And then Colby will typically zero in on one of those and we'll talk about potentially him going down the route of writing a script with it. And so he's written 2 scripts right now that we're kind of deliberating which one to go down the road of. And he kind of really cultivates the whole entire draft. And then I'll read them and I'll give him my thoughts about it or what have you. And then he'll, you know, craft them further. So we're in that phase right now where those stories are being kind of organically cultivated based off our dialogue. And then as producers start and more people coming in, they get shaped more. But that's the fun part I would say we're in right now.
Yeah, I can tell you more films are to come, and you know, there's always a queer aspect to each of them.
Definitely.
So you can expect to see more of that from us, even if the genre or the tone or whatever changes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That sounds terrific. Looking forward to more projects from the both of you down the road. But
Well, thanks, Gabe.
before I leave, a thought just came up to me, and it's from something that you earlier said. Define Southern Gothic horror.
Ooh, fun.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, Southern Gothic is a literary tradition that took shape in the middle of the last century, and it at that time was mainly a comment on racism in the South was one of the big themes. But something that is always consistent about a Southern Gothic is a lot of times it is about the South being pulled into modernity, often kicking and screaming, as the quote goes. And so it's about the way that, you know, time kind of does a number and time progresses whether you want it to or not. And, you know, it deals with the macabre, societal and physical rot. And so we brought all of those themes together, but kind of updated it and are looking at it through a queer lens. As opposed to, you know, the issues that were salient in the South in the mid-50s, which is not to say that racism is not still present in the South. But just looking at it alternatively through a queer lens is, you know, what we wanted to do.
Well said. Well said. Sam Colby, thank you very much for carrying this conversation about Ganymede for us. It is a fascinating queer horror film that is trending right now in our in the industry and in cinema. So keep this up. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yes,
Gabe. Appreciate
yes.
everything you asked.